This is Monica Perez here with a new guest, an author and more, Hunter Hastings, who is here to talk about his book, Aberrant Capitalism, the Decay and Revival of Customer Capitalism. So that actually takes us from the beginning to the end of the subject of the book. But first, let's say hi to Hunter and tell us a little bit about what you're doing and what you do, and also about the book.
Well, hi, Monica. Thanks for inviting me onto your show. It's a great pleasure and honor for me.
You're very welcome. Happy to have you.
So I think of myself as an economist and an entrepreneur. And the reason I say that is I've taken a couple of degrees in economics a long time ago, but kept up with the development of the economics profession and academy. And it's really, really changing. But it's the science of human thriving. It's how we all get better, how we elevate our quality of life. And so it's really a civilizational study. So I really enjoy economics. But you've got to earn some money. So when I exited that part of the learning curve, I joined a corporation, a great corporation, Procter & Gamble, and learned about marketing. And their approach to marketing is the customer is the boss, that the purpose of the corporation is to create value for the customer. It's really a noble profession. And so I've continued that through my professional track. I was in the consulting business. I was briefly a CEO. I've been a CMO. I've done a lot of global branding work, so really focusing on branding. The purpose of writing the book, Monica, was that there's a lot of young people who have a negative attitude towards capitalism. I'm not sure they know what they're talking about, but when the Pew Research survey went out in 2022, less than 40% of the young people 18 to 39 in the USA would say anything positive about capitalism. And a much greater number said a positive attitude about socialism. So we think they've got the wrong end of the stick. And so my co-author and I wrote this book, and we start out with the famous chart of per capita GDP, which is flat forever since the beginning of the world, and then turns up at the beginning of capitalism and the Industrial Revolution and up to today. And it's raised quality of life for billions of people across hundreds of years. So we wanted to look at that. But what young people are probably against is corporations. So we looked at it through the eye of the corporation.
Okay. So my father was definitely old school, and it's because of him that I call myself a libertarian. And he was very appreciative of just modern industry, everything, modern medicine. I mean, because he was really old. He was born, actually, I think today is the anniversary of his death, but his birthday passed recently, and he would be 98 right now. So he's an old timer, and he kind of remembers, he remembers the Great Depression. He was in World War II, and he was an entrepreneur. He was owned his own company, always worked for himself, for better or worse. And he was extremely ethical and really cared about his reputation and really respected businessmen who did the same. He just really appreciated economic liberty, and he loved Milton Friedman. We used to watch Milton Friedman on Sundays.
Yeah.
On PBS.
Free to choose.
Yes, exactly. And he just would love it. He would just absolutely, he's so good. He's so right. My father was contributing to Ron Paul. We were in New York. My father had 9 kids and not a lot of money. And he was giving $25 every campaign cycle to Ron Paul in Texas. And when I moved to Texas, my sister was like, oh my gosh, are you in Ron Paul's district? And I was like, who's Ron Paul? And they were just horrified. So they really cared about that stuff. And I feel like And he loved this country as much as he absolutely hated war and all of that, but he just had that old school respect for America and the American system. And I feel a little disloyal because I I have more than he ever had. I have air conditioning, I have clear ice cubes. Like my life is way more luxurious than his. I have
Right.
more reasons to be grateful than he, but I am starting to get a little bit cynical for 2 reasons. One is there has been like I'm gonna I don't want to scoop the end of the progression that we're gonna be talking about, but the financialization of capitalism, and I was reading some like kind of liberal Catholic stuff. I'm Catholic that was talking about absentee capital as being bad, and that starts making me feel a little communist. I don't like that. But, I like freedom, and if this is where freedom brought us, like, that bums me out, and then I start getting jaded, and then the other reason I'm jaded and cynical is this idea of the young people, and I feel like they're so easily propagandized, and the propaganda is, first of all, that they're exploiting that we're still calling stuff capitalism, which maybe should be called something a little bit different, and that they're still uh, being fed into this dialectic or whatever you want to dichotomy, I don't know, of capitalism versus communism, and they like the idea of communism, and these are kids who are probably even have more reasons to be grateful even than I have. And they boy, I don't know what they think they're going to get if it's not going to be better.
Right. Be careful
And
what you wish for.
yeah, and then that makes me feel like hopeless for the future. So I would love for you to explain to us, and this is why I really like the book, is that it's short. It's like 80 pages, and it makes it what I just explained. I mean, maybe not the youth part, that's like something we're going to talk about at the end, but what happened to capitalism? Why can we love it and hate it at the same time? I really love the way it's very simple. Um, like I was telling you in our very brief chat before we went on the air, I'm a conspiracy theorist. Like I'll look back at history and I will see behind every official narrative shadows and machinations and dirty dealing and corruption, all of that stuff, which a lot of it was there. It's not that it wasn't there. However, the reason I will say, just as a caveat, so I don't interrupt you every 5 minutes and say, "Well, that guy kind of was no good," or "That guy kind of was no good," is that the fact that the actual abiding principle that did result in our well-being was stuff like competition, innovation, the arm's length transaction, and the rewards that brings to everybody. So I'm going to, in the spirit of your book, it's not a deep history book. It's a book of about principles and how I think they were proven out and then what happened to them. So, who was your audience for this book? Is it the young people? Is it college? How do you see this book being used?
Yeah, it's for young people. It's published by Cambridge University Press, so their model is to sell it or send it to college and university libraries. So hopefully it'll be part of a curriculum where young people are learning. You're right; they're immersed in propaganda mills, but hopefully they'll be able to get a copy of the book and it'll be part of their balanced view. So
Yeah.
let,
Yeah.
let me put myself on your side of the thinking. I would call myself a libertarian. I would call myself a Ron Paul supporter. I went to watch him when he was campaigning for president. I'm a member of the
Yeah,
Mises
right on.
Institute. So I'd be an anarcho-capitalist. And
Yes, that's how I always labeled myself until now. I feel like the whole thing is a setup for world government and we are just, you know what I mean? Like I'm telling you, I'm just too far down the rabbit hole. I'm cynical at this point, but that's okay. I won't bring you down.
So let me see if I can frame it for you in a positive light, because you're right, there are a couple of ways it could develop. So we look at three phases, Monica. One is what we think of as the golden age of corporate capitalism. Corporations are a brilliant invention. Before we invented corporations, we had partnerships, and we talk about one of them in the book, Wedgwood Pottery in the UK. Wonderfully creative, great products, improved people's lives, but they couldn't scale. They couldn't reach the number of people that capitalist corporations do. So America first, and then other countries around the world invented the corporation, which created back then mass production, mass distribution, mass merchandising. So this will trigger your conspiracy theory instincts, but one of the ones we talk about is John D. Rockefeller, the founder of Standard Oil. And he looked at what he did as civilizational. So he's producing kerosene. It's to light people's homes. Before that happened, there were candles, and candles were for rich people. They're really expensive and they weren't very good. But he got kerosene lighting into all these homes throughout America, in the barns and the homes in the countryside and out in the far west frontier, so that kids could do their homework or be part of the family gatherings at night, and dad could work in the barn and mom could do her work as well. So he looked at it as civilizational, and then just a whole bunch of stories like that. Henry Carnegie has a great quote that we put in the book, which is that entrepreneurs take worthless stuff, and because of the demand of the people, they turn it into value. And that implies that the customer is creating the value, the consumer is creating the value, and the entrepreneurs serve them. So this phase of capitalism was entrepreneurial. And you like the quote from Mises at the beginning of the book. It's capitalism is entrepreneurial, not managerial. So then what happened, Monica, was the entrepreneurs left. They died, or they handed it over to their successors, and managers took over. And management and managerialism has been a kind of entropy in capitalism because it shifts the goals. It didn't start out that way. The beginning of the managerial era was very positive. My old firm, Procter & Gamble, invented brand management in 1932, which was to identify the customer and find out what they want and get it to them. That's specifically what they said. And that was customer capitalism. But then a number of things happened. One is they got entangled with a couple of war economies in the First and Second World War. And the war economy is centrally planned. People decide what is produced, not customers. And that principle drifted into the management suite between the wars and after the war. So central planning became the mode of private companies. And that was not entrepreneurial. It was allocating resources as the managers wanted to do it, to be efficient and get the highest market share and those kinds of things. And a command and control structure started to emerge. You will plan at the center, we'll tell people what to do, we'll allocate resources for them, and we'll manage them so that they do exactly as they're told. And then, as you mentioned, the next phase,
I have a quick question.
Please.
When you are saying that the war influenced that, was the communism also an inspiration for that at all, do you think?
No, I don't think so. There wasn't much difference between a centrally planned communist economy and a centrally planned war economy in the US or the UK, or Germany, if you want to look at that. So I'm separating economics and politics, but I think it was just the instinct of we want to control what is produced.
Because so I just remember that Stalin was getting some good press back then. Mm-hmm. There was some industrial success there, which people don't realize. And it seems, so I would guess those are just parallel tracks because they both had the war thing.
Yeah, I think so. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was a big fan of Mussolini, who made the trains run on time. That central control, it has appealed to American politicians. But the point is that drifted into the private economy. So executives who were called into the war economy to run these allocation committees went back and started running GE and IBM and all of those other kinds of companies. So central planning became the mode. And too much central planning. There's a great quote in the book from Reginald Jones, an Englishman, but he was the CEO of GE. He said, we got so many central plans, we can't understand our own planning. There's too much. We didn't know what was going on in the C-suite. And then the next phase, Monica, which you referenced yourself, was financialization. So as the financial sector expanded, it started to dictate the purposes and the goals of the corporation. You've got to produce for a small sliver of the population. They called it shareholder value maximization, which Milton Friedman had something to do with, by the way. And that became the dominant mode. So the way we think about a value of a company today is, what's its market capitalization? What's its 5-year total return rate? And that's got nothing to do with customers. It may be a result of them serving customers, but their purpose has been distorted. So our point is that the customer part of customer capitalism got eroded away during the 20th century.
I thought of you yesterday. I was reading the Wall Street Journal, and there was an article about Citibank. Citibank has a CEO. I worked at Citibank in my youth, and John Reed was the CEO at the time.
Yeah.
No relation to the communists, but whatever. So she was saying how nobody ever thinks about this big driver of revenue at Citibank. It's called like services or something, and it keeps the pipes clean or whatever. I did not know what she was talking about. However, I thought it was funny because what she said was, people don't know what this is. They've never heard of it. We're going to add value by shining a little more light on this division, because that will make the share price go up. Mm-hmm. And I was like, wow, that's so funny that she absolutely equated. I wish I had the quote handy. She simply equated a better business, more value added, as perfectly measured by the share price. And you made a good point, because it was hard for me to get my mind around how, because if you're super theoretical, as I am, and I'm sure it was a Milton Friedman, his idea was that the share price will more or less perfectly reflect long-term value added, like the NPV of the long-term value added. And that in turn will be a reflection of customer satisfaction, and that all those things will connect. And I don't have my finger on how, and it was like a whole chapter basically on how those things became disconnected. And I don't know if you want to jump ahead, but I would like you to explain in that simple way how those things got disconnected. The share price from which should have been a reflection of that real value added, but it isn't anymore.
Right. So the original mechanism is based around value. Value first is not measurable. It's a feeling. This, what we said at the beginning about the quality of life. That's how customers experience value. They feel better. So the genius of the consumer is that they always want something better. They're uneasy, as Mises called it, and they know there's something better. They don't quite know what it is, and so they encourage entrepreneurs to make their lives better. There's a transaction there if they get a value proposition they like, so we call that exchange value. And so cash flow, the revenue to the firm, is a financial reflection of value. And so if the stock price is merely some multiple of free cash flow, then you could make that claim. But it isn't. It's a manipulation of the balance sheet to create what they call earnings, which is just an accounting mode of managing the P&L in a certain way, so that they can multiply that, they can forecast it, and then they can turn that into claims and derivatives, which is what the financial sector trades. So one of the examples in the book is Jack Welch, who's held up as one of the great CEOs of all time. Well, he was a genius of earnings management, and he always forecast earnings and then delivered them plus 1 penny. And he did that for many, many years. He had lots of techniques for doing that.
You can do that one of the things that they do, now that you pointed out, is like withhold, some stuff that you could account for now, they'll withhold it so that you can smooth out the earnings. It's not just maximizing, it's that predictability that's so important.
Right. Or another thing that GE had, it became a financially oriented company. He had lots of insurance assets and things in insurance portfolios that he could buy at any time and sell at any time. So if he needed the earnings to go up, he just sell something out of the insurance portfolio, and that becomes this period's earnings, and so earnings are managed that way. So the manipulation of the P&L and the balance sheet turned into trading by the financial sector does not accurately reflect the value that's created for customers. Bill Lazonick, who we quote in the book a lot, talks about profit without prosperity, which is the separation of those two concepts. So customer capitalism should be for the prosperity of customers. And then just to complete the three-part cycle, Monica, the great hope, not a guarantee, but the great hope now is that we've got new business models that are emerging where we're directly connected to the customer. So the customer is the boss at places like Amazon, where, just counting the retail part of Amazon, people can choose what they want. They can buy it. They can get it delivered. If they don't like it, they stop buying. There's a direct reflection of customer preferences in the performance of Amazon. Now, there's still a few balance sheet manipulations, I'm sure, but it's a much more accurate reflection. And that is customer data. So what are we getting now with AI and machine learning is just customer data. It's behavioral. It's not how they feel so much as what they do that imputes how they feel, which is Austrian economics. So we have this possibility that the customer will become the boss. The data flowing from them will directly affect what is designed and produced in the corporation, and we'll get customer capitalism back. Now, that's not certain by any means. There's a lot of closed systems that aren't as responsive, but we hope that it's the open system, the customer responsive system that will dominate in the 21st century.
When you said earlier the quote about taking, I think it was Carnegie, you said was taking something worth nothing and making it worth something. I remember when eBay, I mean, I don't know if I remember necessarily like when it very first came out, but when it first, I became aware of it, I was like, wow, that is value added that that's the most value added thing the internet could possibly do, in my opinion. Like, it's not a Sears catalog online. It's taking somebody's trash. It's that Coase, it's like a Coase multiplier, like the grease and the Coase theorem, where you just get something that is literally trash for one person. You can find that one person in the world who will find value in it enough to cover the shipping costs.
Yeah.
That's it. And I mean, boy, what a like a great way of extracting value from literally trash, stuff that you would otherwise just throw away. I love that.
Except we must think of it in the other direction, Monica, which is that the customer who purchased, who decided it had exchange value, is the one that creates the value. Until there's a customer who wants it, who sees a benefit in it, it is trash. As soon as the customer decides they want to buy it, then it's valuable. And so the customer decides that, not the producer. And that's the key element.
And actually, I think the medium is the product in that case, or at least the entrepreneur. It's like literally entrepreneur. It's like literally connecting the people, but it's the product that you can find. You can, I guess, pull out the customer. It's a place where customers go, and that's where you want to be. So that's very interesting. It's making me think of things in a different way. So do you mind going back a little bit and talking a little bit about the emergence of the corporation? Because I think about the corporation, if you think of like the British kind, like, or the Dutch, the British, the Dutch India Company, like all those things that were kind of public-private. They did not emerge from a capitalist system. They were mercantilist, I guess. Like what was what's the transition from that to what I, as an American, think of and with my father, with his meat market and his gas station, and like that to me is like the beginning, the small stuff. But I feel like there's a difference between the big corporations and the mom and pop entrepreneurship, and a big history behind those big corporations of globalist corporations, and the struggle that we have to get to be able to participate in that market.
Yeah, and that's where capitalism comes in, where capital specifically comes in, Monica. So if you go before the corporation was invented, most of the economic units were, as you said, sole proprietors, a lot of family businesses, and what they called partnerships. But there's usually just a couple of partners. And they're limited in the amount of money that they can raise, the amount of capital they can put together, and their liability was complete. If the business fails, they were personally liable, and a lot of them would end up in bankruptcy court or in jail. It was the incentives against being an entrepreneur back then were really, really high. And then it was the British Parliament that introduced the limited liability legal framework, that an investor in a corporation, their liability would be limited to the amount of money that they put into it. So if I put $100,000 into a corporation, that's all I'm going to lose. I'm not going to
like
lose
no recourse.
Yeah, well, limited liability. I'm not going to luse my house. I'm not going to lose my
Right.
possessions, just my investment. That's how it was legally constituted. So then
But
John D.
you do,
Rockefeller,
I just people don't like limited liability corporations sometimes, and I maybe a misunderstanding. If you actually commit malfeasance as an individual, even in your capacity as a corporate officer, you do have personal liability, correct? Like you can have your own insurance.
yes. No, you're right. I'm talking about investors and their capital risk. Now, yes, if there's malfeasance, hopefully you'll go
Yeah,
to
I know.
jail.
I'm serious
Yeah.
because it sounds like, like a vaccine shield is like a limit, limits your liability. Like it sounds like it could be a bad thing, but it's really just about building a fence around your investment is how much you can lose.
Again, I wanted you to think about the positive side of that, which is now I can recruit a whole bunch of investors and I can create Standard Oil instead of Wedgwood Pottery. I can take a number of investors, I can scale, I can buy machinery and build my factory at greater efficiency. The cash flow of entrepreneurship is always negative in the first few years, so my investors cover that. So it unleashed this amazing creativity and scaling and productivity of the corporation. So you can't have capitalism without capitalists.
But it actually, the thing I love the most about it is that it gave labor the opportunity to also be capital, because you can invest in it in little
Mhm.
pieces that you could never take the risk or the time or have the actual money. That's what I always like about it, is that the share you can have you can have shares in the smallest amount of thing makes you an owner.
Yeah, and today, I mean, we've all got 401ks or pensions, or we're in a pension fund that's run by the corporation or some group representing the corporation. And the other nice thing that's happening today, Monica, is a lot of private equity firms are granting ownership to every employee in the company. And so they have the ownership incentive, which is the great drive in capitalism. So KKR, the
Mhm.
octopus squid or whatever they used to call it, has done a number of these deals where they take over a company, they give the employees ownership, and then when they sell it on, everybody makes a big check. There was a
Yeah.
recent case, Chicago Overhead Doors. Doesn't that ring a nice bell?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, sounds like
a nice,
a real thing.
yeah,
I know what that
a,
is.
a little regional company. Right, exactly. You know what they do. And everybody at the end of KKR's period got, $250,000, $300,000 in ownership shares in cash at the end. So
That's
this
cool.
idea of ownership as the incentive
Yeah.
is a very positive return that we're making.
Okay. So they established the LLC and that changed things.
Mhm. Yeah, change things because of entrepreneurs, because of people like Carnegie and Rockefeller. We talk about the Quaker Oats Company in the book. Henry Kroll was the great entrepreneur there. So before Quaker Oats, you can think of it in its nice paper boxes delivered and kept in your larder. You used to buy cereal out of a barrel, an open barrel in a general store. And God knows who's put their hands into it. And you got
Oh, I'm
mice
sure
running
it had
around.
moths flying out of it for sure.
So he invents nutritious, well-made, safe food. And there are just tons of examples like that. You mentioned Sears Roebuck catalog. Richard Sears he wanted to get every farmer in the country the access to all these new tools and equipment and methods that were coming out of the Industrial Revolution. He did everything he could to give everybody access at cheap prices. So all of this was customer capitalism, we call it. It was good for everybody.
Yeah, that was like the Amazon. I always think
I
remember the first time I saw the internet, I was like, this is just a catalog. This is just a catalog.
Well, it is essentially a little easier to use, but you're right.
It's funny you were mentioning that you worked at P&G. I have such fond memories of Ivory soap that I recently tracked down a perfume that is the scent of Ivory soap. So that I always smell like I just got out of the shower. I just think that's it's like the most positive, uplifting, kind of innocent smell you could possibly have. And I mean, that's a legacy. You know what I mean? Think about the emotional content of something like that, just a simple product.
Yeah, we work very hard on that. There's a great industry in perfume and scents, and we work very hard with consumers to find out what makes them feel good. You said it brilliantly, that innocent baby-like smell that you get from Ivory. But we had another detergent called Gain, which was a much more strong aroma, but to a lot of moms it suggests, hey, it's clear that my clothes are fresh and clean, and the scent says that, and I like it. I feel good about that. So that was not an accident. That's a lot of consumer research.
And so I actually think that marketing is a value-added thing to let me know, like what eBay does, to let me know that there's a product out there that I want that will make my life better. I actually, people don't like commercials or whatever, but I think that they can add real value unless they're, not really honest. But I also feel like people don't, resent like mega billionaires or whatever. And I would say in this is my conspiranoid thing. I'm not going to make you paint this with this brush, but people like Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk, and like the Musk example is very obvious. His company was built with billions of dollars of government subsidies. But taking aside that, so I consider all of that, all the things I don't like about it, corruption of the system. And we can even go back and say with Rockefeller, John D. Rockefeller, he did bad things. I've read where he defrauded people out of he wanted a monopoly and he defrauded people out of their businesses. However, what he did actually do, there was a lot of real value added in what he did. And it's a shame that whatever it was, the drive that probably got him to sacrifice everything for building this company had some casualties there. But I've always felt like the first mover. So get so far down the anarcho-capitalism road, maybe the last thing that I could fully embrace, but I did ultimately embrace it, was you'd have to convince me that patents are good. Like I don't believe that you can use the government to protect your intellectual property if you've put it out there. You can keep it secret like Coke does. That's okay. But if somebody wants to figure it out and you put it out in the air. But I feel like first movers, people who invent something or do something first, add such tremendous value that they do get rich just by being the first one out there, being the first one coming up with that idea. It takes a while for people to catch up in many of those cases. So I've always been a supporter of like the honest, super rich guy like Papa John. They must have been so threatened by his that his, literally wholesome success, that they tricked him. You can even look at like Wikipedia. They explain that this guy was absolutely tricked into destroying himself. It's awful, but he was an example of somebody who just was figured it out and added a lot of value and gave people some really cheap pizza that they used to like to eat on game day.
Yeah.
So I respect all that. But I feel like, and I would always like bristle at the robber baron idea, because they weren't there were probably cases where they were robbing, but they weren't robbing.
Nobody got robbed.
Yeah, their customers certainly, and in many cases, I mean, Henry Ford is like the example of somebody who really did consider the employees and the customer, and I believe, I mean, he also has like malign stories, but I haven't actually dug into it myself, but my impression is that he did care about uh he had that ethical comradeship, that we're in it together. I want to add value
Yeah,
here.
he was one of the great philanthropists of all time, actually.
There you
So
go.
two things, Monica. One is marketing. I was proud to be a marketer. I used to think of it as being like an angel. You find out what is bothering people, and then you fix it by inventing a new product or a new service. Marketing is a love affair with the customer. You've got to love the customer. We call it empathy in official terminology, but you got to love the customer. I loved Mom when she was my customer, and I tried to make her life better. Now, it does get distorted by bad communication and so on like that, but the essence of marketing is that loving relationship. So I'm a big fan of marketing. It's what Peter Drucker said. There's only two things that the company does that's useful: is marketing and innovation. And those are the value added components. With regard to the robber barons, one of the interesting things is that term was coined by a journalist. Her father had been an oil producer in Ohio, one of the mom and pop oil producers. He got outcompeted by Standard Oil, and she didn't like that competition. But if you're an Austrian economist, you know Schumpeter and Schumpeter's coinage of the idea of creative destruction. Now, I always tend to remember the destruction part of that, but it's the creative part that the power, the new solutions, the new ideas, the new services. The price of kerosene for a gallon came down from just under $1 to 16 cents when Rockefeller was operating Standard Oil. If you can't compete, you're going to lose. So the market is a selection mechanism. It picks winners and losers, and we just have to understand that.
What was, I'm guessing, an unintended consequence of some of those great statistics or prices that you put in there, of how prices just went down? I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was basically in the 19th century. Prices went down, down, down. And I actually tried to do some research like that for another purpose. What I was trying to show or look into is prices going down, because prices should really have gone down a lot. And did wages also go down? And the reason you can look at the 19th century for that is because that's when it happened, and wages did not go down. From what I could tell, wages were flat and prices went down, which meant that the labor was actually sharing in those productivity gains.
Right. Yeah, real wages went up.
And then, of course, you absolutely cannot ever see that again because of Keynes. Because you had the Fed, and then you had this money printing and World War I and all that. But Keynes said there are sticky wages. We don't want that. We don't want flat. What a piece of crap, right? And he's the liberal. The liberals like him. It's like, are you kidding me? He invented robbing the labor, deceiving them by saying we have sticky wages. So what we need to do is print more money so they can still make $10 an hour. But instead of the kerosene going down in price, the kerosene will go up in price. And then we don't have to give them a raise. It's really sinister, really nasty, but you could see the 19th century was so perfect as an example of how the system actually does work. And then that's when my conspiranoia kicks in, and I see 20th century, we got to put an end to this. Like, this isn't going to result in centralized power, you know? And how can we bring the whole world to heel if we this was supposedly a David Rockefeller thing, that you want to bring East and West together, you've got to speed up the East and slow down the West. I don't know. You don't have to address that.
Well,
But the
that
19th
yeah,
century thing is quite elegant.
that's a different Rockefeller. But
Yes, certainly.
so you're probably familiar with a chart. They call it the chart of the century. I can't remember who publishes it, but you can look it up, and it shows the rate of price changes in the economy today. And there's two sets of lines. One is going down, and that's things like technology, the cost of laptops and those kinds of things, and food and stuff that's produced in the private sector. What's going up is the cost of healthcare, the cost of education, and the cost of things that the
Absolutely.
government is involved with. And so it's the government entanglement, which is a big part
Yes.
of the inflation that we get today. Obviously, Keynes was the great saint of all of that. And
I want to talk about that now, actually. It's
okay,
one of the notes I wrote. So,
please.
so you talk about financialization, but I also feel like not just subsidies and picking winners and losers, but the effect of what I learned in business school were called regulatory barriers to entry. But
Mhm.
they're so enormous that I believe that what they do, I think they're largely responsible for these weird oligopolies that are all over what should have been a very flat thing like tech. It's so easy to I mean, not saying it's easy to build eBay or it's easy to build a platform of some kind, but I feel like so many industries have such high barriers to entry that are artificial from the government. And then the government, it's that weird corpo governmental continuum
Mhm.
where, they just corrupt the whole system and keep people from being able to be entrepreneurs, even in something that should have been like with the internet and stuff. It would have been the end of racism and sexism because you can't see who you're dealing with.
All right.
You could just sell whatever you want. But I feel like it's been hijacked, and I blame the government coming and going, really.
Yeah, I agree with you there. It's this government entanglement is part of the errors of the 20th century. Murray Rothbard said there are no monopolies unless the government creates them through the three kinds of regulation that he talked about. And what's happened is the corporations create this. They write these regulations and they take them to the government and
Yes.
get them adopted as law, and then go to the administrative state and get them made into regulation. So it protects the incumbent. You're 100%
Absolutely.
right. So this entanglement with government has been a very negative development. Now, while I'm positive about the 21st century, we haven't got out of that problem yet. So you look at AI, you've got a lot of people in the AI business trying to write regulations that will protect them in the name of safety. Don't let anybody do this. Just
I
let guns do this.
know.
And so that's a problem. Now, something like blockchain might be the solution for that if we can make that the new technology of the 21st century where it's less controllable.
They had these guys, I think it was called maybe Gladstone AI or something. These two brothers, Jeremy and Edward Harris. They are, I guess, French Canadian because their first names are written in a French style. They were
Mhm.
just on Joe Rogan, and they were, your kind of 28-year-old Silicon Valley garage guy images, wearing t-shirts and whatever. But they had just, with probably the help of their founder who ran AI policy for the Pentagon, written a 200 and something page recommendation to Congress about how AI, actually for that show, I coined the term the Terminator threshold. They're like,
Mhm.
AI is going to become conscious, and we're not gonna be ready for it. One of the things that these guys are recommending is to cap AI, make open sourced AI illegal. Just you're not
Mhm.
allowed to write the code in public. Cap it at current levels and put in jail anyone who doesn't have a license to write the
Wow.
code or who reveals the code. So that is scary.
Yeah, that's very Canadian. The Canadians are big
I
on
know.
putting
I feel like
people in jail.
there are handlers. I feel like Canada is now the handler of America, like, on the world stage, like, whoever put them up to it, that
Yep.
whatever globalist court, the World Economic Forum put Canada in charge of
I
America.
know. They're certainly on the left of the spectrum and dripping it down across the border.
Yeah, they love that, but jail, I mean, yikes.
Right, exactly. Yes, I think this is a big problem we might not solve immediately, but entrepreneurship will always solve it. If we'll find another technology like blockchain, or we'll find some what I like to call regulatory entrepreneurship. We'll find some way around. I think I'm a big believer in the free market, Monica, and the freedom will prevail in the end.
So, I don't think so we're gonna wrap up, I think, but I don't think we really elaborated on why what really gives you hope about the 21st century, about what really makes you think that we can get away from, or at least have an end run around this financialization of capitalism. I mean, I feel like I'm worried that the digital age is getting ushered through a door of control, but you have some reasons to hope, which were well brought out in the book. But like, what are the specifics that give you hope there?
Well, you think of three dimensions. There's the customer, the consumer. So I'm a great believer in the consumer. The consumer is the boss. The consumer does ultimately make the decisions, and it might take a long time for that to take effect. But I do believe that that's long term the dominant trend. Technology develops separately. It develops by people tinkering and experimenting, and I think the big techs right now are trying to bend it in a certain direction of, as you say, control and tracking and behavioral modification and so on like that. But technology will develop in its own direction, and those customers will find a way to make it work for them. And one of the examples of that is we think now of the financialization with the stock markets and the kind of relationship with financial markets that we have now, but it doesn't have to be that way. There's lots of fintech innovations. There's crowdsourcing. There's different ways to access capital. And so this original trend that we saw, the original shift from the partnership to the limited liability corporation, that was wonderful for the time. It was a great invention. Now it may be time for another one. We'll shift to a different relationship with capital markets. And
Oh,
so there's no reason why we should feel locked in to what we have now. Schumpeter was right. We'll always find a better way.
I think I'm glad that I asked you that because I do struggle. Like, I always think of Bitcoin as the stepping stone to a cashless society, which it would be a highly controlled society. But the way you're talking about it, like, I think I should think about it as, instead of just looking at Amazon and Tesla and the government and the World Economic Forum, all the all the things that happen around the edges with things like Bitcoin, with things like, 3D printers or people using their own AI, which is,
Mhm.
it's out there now, it is open now. And even if you don't conquer the other thing, even if the other thing doesn't go away, the financial capitalism, even if the super big tech gets absorbed into that system and it doesn't change at all, there certainly are reasons to hope that we can still interact on the sidelines there and could, I mean, so I was an anarcho-capitalist and then I became a kind of a philosophical agorist.
Mhm.
So I feel like there's a gray market there where you could live your whole life, and maybe this is a way where, the digital age is a place where there's more of that.
I think that's a positive thought. I think there's another direction, a structural direction, which will change, Monica, and that's decentralization. So we think of everything now as centralized, the big companies, the big government, the central planning that we talked about. But the trend is going to be towards decentralization. Everyone's got access to the internet or to AI or to whatever model that you're going to join in with technologically, but we can shift towards what some people are calling self-sovereignty. The individuals will get more and more control over their own lives, and we'll find ways to do that. We can do it now with technology. We can do it now with, as I said, some different relationships with financial markets, and it's individual creativity and in small communities and all joined together in the network so we can be as productive as we are today. But I think decentralization is another trend of the 21st century, which will reverse a lot of the centralization of the 20th century.
Well, that is very hopeful. That's very hopeful indeed. So I like that. I really appreciate that. And I would like to, I'm finding talking to you a bit of a white pill, and I like that. So I'm wanting to know where I can hear more. Why don't you tell people where, first of all, this book, Aberrant Capitalism, The Decay and Revival of Customer Capitalism. I feel like it's a very easy to read book and really does explain that. And that you can just get on Amazon. I could see,
Yeah,
unless there's a better place for you to tell
absolutely.
people.
No, buy it on Amazon, please do. And
And what else
I,
do you have? It looked like you do some consulting when I was looking at your website, but are there other places we can hear your thoughts? Do you
well,
uh
there are two places I'd love people to visit. One is thevaluecreators.com. That's a website that tries to translate some of these thoughts into business education. We have an online course called the Value Creators course, and it tries to talk about the principles and philosophy of this value management, the value for customers, and how you pursue that. So I'd love people to try that. And then hunterhastings.com is a place where you can find articles and podcasts and tweets and that kind of thing from me.
Okay, oops. So is this, I'm trying to see if this is that the correct URL, valuecreators.com for that one?
Put a "the" in front of it, Monica,
Okay, I'm gonna
thevaluecreators.com.
take that down because that didn't look right to me. How about this one? I should be able to get this one right. Hunterhastings.com?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Okay, let's see. Sorry for the little delay. I just want to make sure I put it up on the screen because sometimes people can't.
Yeah, I should have put it in the chat for you.
No, that's okay. So, all right, that's super fun. Thank you very much. You sent me the PDF of the book so I could read it quickly and in real time, and I really enjoyed it. Read it cover to cover. I put lots and lots of notes in it, so I probably read this book more thoroughly than anyone who's ever read this book. But I absolutely loved it. I liked it. I loved the progression. It was very clear, very easy to understand, and most important, I felt, was it it helped me restore my faith in capitalism by pulling out what's aberrant capitalism.
Yeah.
Yeah, I pulling that out to help me understand, because I was like giving up on the name. I'm like, I can't, do I have to, is it financial capitalism I don't like, corporatism? Like, I don't know what the problem is, but let's not give up the word. I feel like Murray Rothbard used to say, like, don't give up the word. So we'll keep the word. And I very much loved talking to you, and I'm going to just hit it. And if you wouldn't mind sticking around just for a second after we go off air, I have to make sure your upload is good. If you don't mind.
Happy to. Thanks so much, Monica.
All right. Thank you so much. Thanks you all for coming. And this is Monica Perez.